Hello, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours FM, episode number 87. I am your host, Carrie Dills, and I'm excited to have the first official podcast in the new series talking about how to grow your business skills. And today we're going to be talking about the art of communicating and connecting with other humans with our guest, Topher DeRosia. Topher, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I am okay. I appreciate you coming on. I think we first maybe talked about this at Pressnomics last year.
Boy, maybe. That was a lifetime ago.
That was a lot of sleeps ago, so yes. We don't have to recall any details of that. But yeah, so Pressnomics, that was the first time I got to meet you in person. And then more recently here at WordCamp US, I got to hang out with you and meet your cool family and your sweet wife. So that was awesome. So for folks that don't, well, let me give the little spiel before we dive in. Hello to everybody who is tuning in live for Office Hours. If you want to ask questions of Topher, you can use the Q&A app if you're watching this via Google+, or you can on Twitter use the hashtag OfficeFM. We will get those and we'll ask them questions live during the show. So with that, Topher, kind of give us the who you are, what you do.
All right. Boy, I'm a husband and father. I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I have been a web developer since about 1995. Really only focusing on WordPress since 2010. But since 2010, I haven't really done anything except WordPress. And I dove in head first. I didn't really like WordPress as a CMS until 3.0 came out with custom post types, and then it was perfect. And so I dove in and I fell in love, and I went all in. I started going to WordCamps, and we started a meetup in my city, and just we've been having a wonderful time ever since.
So you didn't like it at first. Did you have to use it as a requirement for a project, or were you just sort of,
no,
it was new and you were looking into it?
No. I remember when blogging became a thing and there were 1,800 tools and all of them were bad. And I tried several and I didn't like them. And then, so I gave up for a while. And then WordPress came out. And I looked at it and I thought, well, I can do that. I'm a PHP MySQL developer. It's not that big a deal, right? So I was teaching a class at a local university at the time, and my students were required to do a project through the semester. So I said, I'll do a project too, and I'll build a blog. And I did. And I used it for about 12 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I used it long after I was a WordPress developer because I was lazy and I didn't feel like changing over. But eventually, I felt like if I was going to claim to be a WordPress expert, I should probably use it. So
fair enough.
Now my blog is on WordPress, but as a blog, I thought it was fine. I did not continue to develop mine. I mean, after that semester, I never really added any features, so it never really got any cooler than whatever in 2002. Whereas WordPress continued to grow. But even before 3.0, I didn't really like it as an all-purpose CMS because it really was a blog. And once we got custom post types, everything changed. And it grew up, became a real CMS. And
here you are, all those years later,
and here I am.
And you have been a freelancer for many of those years. You mentioned before the show on 3 separate occasions you freelanced full-time for your income?
No, once full-time for 3 years.
Ah, gotcha.
Like I started web development in college, and so immediately it was freelancing. And then I just did it on the side for many, many years. And it was Christmas break 2009, I was talking to my wife and I realized that I had been working freelance work every evening, every day for 3 years. Every day. And my freelance rate was way higher than my day job. And I thought, if I didn't go to work, I could do all this freelance stuff and be done before supper. And I would make a ton more money. Why am I wasting my time going to work every day? And so we decided right there, it was time. 3 years is a nice long run to prove that it was going to work. And so just a couple months later, I put in my notice and we went freelance. And that was just about the same time that 3.0 came out, and I was asked to do a project in WordPress. And so it all just kind of came together. I didn't plan to do WordPress when I went freelance. It just worked out.
Everything
that way.
aligned at the right time.
It really did. But that 3 years of working on the side in the evening was a wonderful proof that it could work. That I never went looking for work. I never said, hey, I need money, I'm going to freelance. People just came to me. People would call me all the time, 2-3 times a week. I'd just get a random call. Hey, my cousin's uncle says you know web stuff. Can you help me? And I'd get suckered into another job. And so it was comforting to know that the work was going to be there.
So we're talking specifically today about using communication and being better at communication as a kind of a basic business skill, a soft skill.
Sure.
When you say people, I mean, most people don't just have, people calling them out of the blue to come come do work. You have to shake a few trees to get customers and clients coming on. So how do you feel like communication played a role in you getting these random?
That's an excellent question, because it was, on the one hand, you could say I never communicated. I had a web page that said, hi, my name is Topher, I build websites. And that's it. No email address, no phone number, nothing. And that was my site almost the entire time I was a freelancer. And so you could say I never communicated. But on the other hand, everybody knows that I do web stuff. Everybody knows. And part of that is a product of just doing it a really long time. I mean, that's what I do. My whole family knows. And so then everybody they know knows. And Topher does web stuff. So, oh yeah, I know a guy. And here, call Topher, email Topher, whatever. So it was actually a process of many, many years of gentle communication, just letting everyone know I do web stuff. And word gets around. And then when I started doing WordPress stuff, I as I mentioned, I really loved custom post types, and so I dove into that hard. And you'll hear a lot of times that if you wanna be really successful, specialize in something. And I specialized in that, and word got around. If you have a question about custom post types, go ask Topher, because he loves them and will be all over it. And so it was less deliberate, overt advertising communication, and it was more general handshaking, talking to everybody I know, spread the word kind of thing.
Did attending WordCamps and being active in your local WordPress community, were you seeing that networking come around and turn into business or word of mouth referrals?
Yeah, it absolutely has. I didn't go to WordCamps for the first couple of years. My first 3 WordCamps were in my own city. So I didn't, go anywhere, but it would never fail. I'd be sitting at the lunch table and somebody would say, "What do you do?" I say, "Oh, I'm a WordPress developer." "Oh, let me ask you a question." And before you know it, they're giving me a card, say, "Give me a call. I've got this thing that I need done," and I have a job. Um,
I would
Go ahead.
go. No, go ahead.
Um, this thing scales. There have been many times in my career when I have been very careful about telling people what I do because they might offer me a job, and that would be terrible. Because I'm
That, I
overwhelmed.
mean, what's worse than somebody offering you a job?
I know.
That's the pits.
It's stressful. If you have too many, if you have 10 people come to you at once and say, "Hey, I need something done," you have to say no. And I try to spread the wealth. I try to send the jobs to friends and things, but sometimes they're just as overwhelmed as I am. In fact, that's often been the case. Somebody will come to me with a job and I'll say, "I can't right now, but let me see what I can find." And I'll ask around and everybody's swamped. So that was one of the reasons for a long time my webpage didn't have my phone number on it or my email address, because I had enough work coming in. I didn't want 10 more people asking me for work.
That makes sense. And you're also, a form of communication by referring out work to colleagues. So what role has communication played in where you presently are? And what do you, for people who are maybe, as developers, or maybe we're working from home, maybe we're not getting out and interacting a whole lot. So we're not going to dig in, and this is a multi-part question, but communication is an art, both in an online interaction, which is probably what most of us are doing day to day, and then also in the real world.
Sure. My primary advice would be to make friends with as many people as you can. It's useful to have everybody know who you are and what you do, but it's horrible to use people to get business. You know what I mean? And so don't use people to get business. Get to know people for who they are, what they do, because they're nice people, because they're fun to talk to, because they're awesome. And everything else will follow naturally. So if you can, go to at least one WordCamp. I mean, if you live far away from all the WordCamps or you can't afford much, try really hard to go to at least one and introduce yourself to every single person you can find. Shake hands. And your goal is not to tell them who you are. Your goal is to find out who they are and what they like, what they do, where they live, all that stuff. And then you take all that knowledge home, and maybe later you ping them on Slack. You say, "Hey, how's it going? We met in Philly, and you told me you were thinking about going to Miami this spring. Are you still going? Does it sound fun? I'd be curious to see what it's like. Tell me about Miami WordCamp when you get back, because that sounds really cool." And you make this friendship, and it's awesome. Friendships are awesome. They're fun. Going to WordCamp is like going to a family reunion now. Everybody hugs you. It's like, hey,
so true.
Last year, my wife and I went together to 12 WordCamps between March and December. And so there were times when we saw the same people a couple of weeks apart. We'd say, "Hey, how you doing? How's it going?" And we became great friends with a lot of people. And now I know a ton of people. And so when I get an overflow of work, I know who to send stuff to. And that's good for them. It's good for me. It's good for the client. Everybody's happy. People know me. They know what I like to do. And so if they have something that fits me, they say, hey, Topher, I got this thing, I don't want to do it, or I don't know how, or whatever. Then I get that. It's a very, very organic process. It's very difficult to game the system. You need to be genuine. You need to be kind. You need to be honest, and everything else fits together.
Do you feel like what you just said is more true in the WordPress space because it is sort of a tight-knit family, if you will, than in the broader business world? I mean, are you quicker to be called out as a fraud?
Yeah, I think so. I have seen other communities similar to the WordPress community that were family like this, but they're certainly not common. Certainly not in the general business community. There's just too much competition and cutthroat. You don't know people. It's easier to be cutthroat when you don't know people. In the WordPress community, at least in the US, we're all fairly tight knit. We know each other. We don't want to be cutthroat. We want to be helpful. We want to help our friends grow. And so I think it would be cool to have it spread to other communities, to have the general business community get in on that, to have the PHP community get in on that, something like that.
Yeah, interesting ponderings there. So curious, for you guys that are listening live, if you have never been to a WordCamp, I would be very curious. Do a little tweet to either at Office Hours FM or hashtag Office FM. And if you're listening to this after the fact, it's not too late. Would still be curious to know, because Topher, I think you're spot on about meeting people, and that's the quickest way to form relationships is by going and in person, meeting folks, shaking their hands.
Sure.
So we've got several questions here, and I'm going to take them a little bit out of order, but a great question from Patty. So you're talking a lot about referring business to colleagues. Do you ever send business to somebody where they dropped the ball and you found out about it? I
have. I have had people come back to me and say, hey, that guy you sent me to, he never answers his phone, and the story. And I feel bad about it. I've never lost a client because of that. I've occasionally just taken care of it myself and say, you know what, I'm sorry. I'll code this up for you, and we'll just take care of it. There have been times where they just went somewhere else, so they found somebody else, but still came back to me for more business later.
So in those cases, have you ever followed up with the colleague and had the conversation, or do you just sort of stop doing referrals?
I have gone back and had the conversation, and occasionally I've been disappointed in them as a person, and I move on. Occasionally there's been good reason. I had one friend who disappeared for 6 months, like off the internet. And I finally tracked him down and said, hey, what happened? And he said, well, there were some medical issues. And that's all I ever knew, but that was enough. I don't need to pry there. And things worked out in the end. The client came back to me and I said, I'm really sorry. We'll work it out. And we did. Being upfront and honest with your client it goes a really long way. And if you send somebody that drops the ball, you say you're sorry and you do what you can to fix it.
Own it.
Own it. Yeah, absolutely.
A question from Jackie. This is a fantastic question, and I'm excited to hear your answer. Can you share any advice for managing communications on projects that are going sideways?
Oh boy. Projects that are going sideways. Well, none of mine go sideways, so I wouldn't know.
Okay, pretend you're like the rest of us.
Often,
so, go ahead.
Okay, what I do is I get everybody involved in a single form of communication, Hangout, Skype, Slack, whatever, and we reduce the problem to the simplest forms we can. What is going sideways? What is the problem here? And we do the best we can to clearly define the problem, and then we make specific assignments to resolve that problem. This thing is broken, you're going to go fix that thing. This other thing is broken, you're going to go fix that thing. And we're all going to get back here together in 24 or 48 hours and report. If it's not fixed, why not? Is something different from our assumption? Is it, just tell me why. There's no condemnation. If you can't get it done in 24 hours, just have a reason. And reducing it to the simplest form possible goes a really long way. It makes it seem much less daunting. When a project is going sideways, it often feels out of control and daunting and stressful. You don't know what to do. When you reduce it to the simplest steps possible, then it's much more manageable. You can say, okay, that one little bit right there, I can fix that thing. And somebody else in the room says, okay, well, this other thing, I can fix that. I can make that get better. And you can quickly get the train back on the tracks if you reduce it down like that and then put it back together properly.
Yeah, that's great wisdom right there. So what would you say in terms of managing like client expectations? They've asked for something in their mind, it is in scope, but as a developer, you're saying, whoa, this is something else entirely.
Yep.
What would that conversation look like?
You need to help the client understand. And you need to understand yourself that it can be very hard for the client to understand. They have no idea what voodoo you are doing. And so you need to find the line beyond which they're going to glaze over and get right up to that line and say, okay, look, this is what we're doing and this is what you've asked for and this is why it's out of scope. It's going to take an extra 12 hours for one person to do this thing that you've asked for. And it's going to cost this much money. And if you're okay with that, great. It's going to cost this much money and we'll do it. It might push the deadline back a little bit because of such and such and such. But this is where communication is huge. The client needs to understand why what they're asking for is out of scope and how much it's going to cost and how much time it's going to be. And I've had clients go both ways and say, well, I didn't realize it was going to be that big a deal. I don't want to spend the money, or the function isn't that important to me. Or thank you for explaining it to me. I really need this. Go ahead and charge me. And I accept the deadline change, but
communicating.
There's definitely a skill, a finesse in talking to clients and helping them understand what it is you do. And some people have it and some people don't. And it can be learned, but it's hard.
So for the don't crowd, how would you learn it?
Practice on people you know and trust. My wife is not a developer. She's not really a computer person, but she understands a lot of what I do because over the years, I've taken the time to sit and carefully explain how FTP works. You have two machines. You need to connect them. And if they don't understand easily, it may not even be your fault. Maybe people just don't care and they don't want to know. But find somebody who doesn't really know what you do and try to explain it to them. And then find somebody else and try to explain it to them. And pretty soon people will run away from you when you start coming into a room.
Oh, that really is good advice. And I used to, years ago when I was managing at Starbucks, I would actually role play conversations with other managers. And it was tremendously helpful to, if you've got something to communicate that's hard to say, being able to even say it out loud to the person that's not the intended audience, it can help you kind of hone how, what your delivery is. That's great advice.
I've done it to an empty room. Just talk through it. Say it out loud. It works with programming, if you're stumped on something, talk it out. Just the act of saying it helps you realize how crazy you must sound to the other person, and you smooth off the rough edges. Cool.
Well, let's get to some more questions here, and great questions coming in on Twitter. Thank you guys for sending those in. So do you have a process to qualify? So going back to talking when you had quite a bit of work coming in, do you have a process to qualify projects and say this is a good fit or this is a bad fit? Are there certain red flags that you're looking at?
I feel like I do. My wife feels like I don't.
Wives are always right, just for the record.
Yeah. A lot of it for me is instinct. And there's two aspects. There's whether or not I want to work with the client and whether or not I want to do the job. A good client might come to me and say, hey, I've got this thing in Python. And I go, nope, I'm not interested. Or a bad client might come to me and say, I've got this cool job and I have to decide. And when I say bad client, it's usually not that they are a bad person or a scammer or something like that. For me personally, it's almost always personality. Do I jive with them? Do I like them? Which doesn't make them a bad person if I don't. It's just going to be awkward and uncomfortable through the whole project. And I get enough work that I don't need to be awkward and uncomfortable in projects. And so often if there's a client that comes to me that just I don't sync well with them, I won't hesitate to send them to a friend because maybe they'll get along great. And that's happened plenty. So a job comes in and I look at it and I do I like this person? Yeah, okay, they're cool. I like them. What's the work? Well, that doesn't sound very fun or whatever. And of course, there's thin times when I say it doesn't matter if it sounds fun. I need to pay the bills this month, so I'm taking that job. So your question is, do I have a process? I have a poor process. I have gut instinct. I do not have a good list that Curtis McHale would be proud of that says check. Okay, this is a good job, or no, this is a bad job.
Well, you know what? Gut is a good thing. Our guts usually have us going in the right direction.
It has only rarely failed me. Usually I'm right on. Just a couple of weeks ago, somebody came to me with a job that I was not interested in because it was dealing with Google Maps, like hardcore with the API and JavaScript and all that stuff. And I stink at JavaScript. And I'm not hard up for cash at the moment. And I was like, I don't want to do this. And my wife's like, you know what? Give it a shot. Maybe you'll have fun. Maybe you'll learn something. And I did. And it was awesome. I had a wonderful time. I learned a ton. It was fun. Now I'm all wound up to make a Google Maps plugin and I had a great time. So sometimes it fails for the good, you know, and wives are always right.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't get my finger off or to get the mute button undone. I was laughing silently back here. Yes, we're getting comments from Teresa just affirming the saying things out loud based on our earlier conversation there. So we've talked about sort of the communication, I guess what we'll call peer communication. So networking, meeting people, forming relationships, getting to know, where people's strengths are, what kind of work they enjoy, so that you can refer work, et cetera. And then, this other form of communication, which is client communication.
Sure.
And specifically when things go sideways. But can you kind of walk through when you're starting a project? Let's say it's a client and they've, you've checked the box if I like them and I like this work that they have. What's your process in terms of setting expectation for for everything from cost to deadlines,
sure,
working relationship, et cetera. And also curious, I'm just all about the multi-part questions today, but I'm also curious how much of this communication takes place in written format, like via email or via Skype, Hangout, that sort of thing.
Sure. The second question is the easiest. 99% of my communication happens in text. I don't have much interest in the phone or Hangouts or whatever. Mostly because often I'm exchanging links and sometimes code and stuff like that, and it's easier just to email it or talk like a text Skype or something like that. The first part of your question is laying out deliverables and stuff like that. In many ways, I am a terrible freelancer. I've never had an LLC. I have maybe twice in my life had a contract, which should make every freelancer just cringe. I'm a handshake kind of guy, and it's worked for me. But that means then there are other ways that I need to communicate things like deliverables and timetables and prices and stuff. And it's almost exclusively via email. We'll have a nice long discussion. Even if the discussion is in text over Skype or something like that, there'll be an email that says, okay, here's what we discussed. I'm going to do these 5 things. They're going to be done on this date, and it's going to cost this much money. Right? And they write back an email and says, yes. And we go. And so it's been very helpful to be very clear up front. This is what I'm doing for this much time, for this much money. Yes or no. But then there's a third aspect to client communication that I really, really like. And it doesn't happen with every client because not every client likes this. But I stay in very close communication, often in chat with the client. I've had clients where we just leave the chat window open all day, every day, and we chit chat all day, every day while I'm working. And it's like being in the same room. I say, hey, you know what? You asked for this thing, but if I do it this other way, you get this other functionality. Would you like that? And they go, oh yeah, that'd be cool. Let's do that. Which wouldn't happen if we weren't in a chat. I wouldn't stop and send an email and wait 3 hours for them to get back to me. I wouldn't call them. I would just go by the scope, and that's the way it is. But like this Google Maps project I said I just did the other day, the client was on Skype just all the time. And several times I said, hey, you asked for this thing, but the API doesn't allow for that. That can't be done. We could do this other thing instead. Would that work? And he said, yeah, that's fine. I really enjoy that. Not everyone will. Not every developer will. Not every client will. But I have found that it is very useful for streamlining the development process. Be able to just say, hey, Do you want this? No. Okay, move on.
Oops, you're freezing up a little. I'm not sure if it's whose end it's on, but so sorry if I'm. Oh, there you are. I can't believe you do business on handshakes. Have you never been burned?
Once in 20 years.
Wow.
And it was for $35 for a domain name fee.
Man, people in Michigan just must be really something.
Oh, very few of my clients are in Michigan. I quickly outgrew Michigan as for a client base. Most of my clients are somewhere else.
Well, all right. So it sounds like there's a lot of informal communication that goes on. Do you use any particular tools like Basecamp or Trello or anything else like that to wrangle communications in a sort of a central location? Oh,
Basecamp was very new and pretty expensive. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I think you froze because I asked the question and then I couldn't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. When I was doing freelance full time, Basecamp was pretty new. Trello wasn't around. Those kind of tools weren't really easily available. And now that I'm not freelancing full time, I usually don't bother. We keep it all in email and it's all good.
All right. Good question. Thank you, Jack.
You know what? That said, if I were to go back to freelancing full time, I almost certainly would use something like Basecamp or Trello or that other app that I really like.
Asana.
Nope. Who makes Bitbucket?
Oh, now that's going to annoy me. Somebody can look it up and tweet the answer.
Yeah, they have a project management tool that we used at XWP that I really liked.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, Jira. I really like Jira.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have used Jira at the tiniest of bits.
Yeah, and I like tools like Jira. I like that the ability to easily segment work and make it in little bits. Break it down to the simplest bits.
Yep. Create issues and assign it to people like GitHub task. So question on pricing, and we always love to talk about pricing.
Oh, yeah.
Is that's the core of business, right? How we're bringing money in.
Yep.
First of all, do you do like flat fee or per project, hourly? Kind of what's your pricing style?
My pricing style is one that I've kind of built myself over time. For a long time, it was just hourly. And somebody said, that's dumb. You should bill by the project. And I tried it and I got burned really hard because it took far too long. So now what I do is I have an hourly rate. Somebody will come to me with a project, and in my head, I will think it's going to take me this many hours. And I will say to them, I will do this work for this much money. And I stick to that. If it's my fault if I go long. So it's kind of a per project, but then I tell them I have an hourly rate and here's what it is. And so if you come to me and say, I want this other thing, I'm going to say, great, that's going to take an extra hour and a half. Therefore, it's going to cost this much extra money. So that they can, if they pay attention, they can do the math in their head ahead of time and say, he's going to charge this much if we want to come back to him with this thing. So it's kind of a hybrid of hourly and per project. So
let's say you get into a project and you realize that maybe you didn't do quite deep enough discovery on a certain feature or something along those lines, and it's going to take you quite a bit longer than you actually estimated. Do you just sort of suck it up because you're working flat fee, or do you go back and have a conversation about why this is going to take longer and cost more than you originally thought?
Yeah, you break it up some, so I hope you can hear me. It depends on a few things. once or twice, I have given a bid and then gotten into the project and realized I was off by 3 or 4 times. And it was going to cost, way more money, way more time. And I can't eat that. And so I will go back to the client and say, I did this discovery and it's going to cost a ton more. We need to reevaluate. And I've had a customer walk away and say, you know what, it's not worth that to me. I didn't realize it was going to be that much work. I've had a customer say, let's do something else. Let's trim it. Let's change it. Let's do it, whatever we need to do to make it work. That's really only happened a couple times. I try to do discovery at a time pretty hard. If it's only a little bit, I'll usually eat it. And a little bit is maybe 5 hours. So, I get to the end of my hours and it's not done, but I could finish it this evening. I'll just do it and let it go at that. I'm pretty hard about sticking to the original quote, which is very similar to a project-based fee style. If I tell you I'm going to do this work for this much money, really changes. But I don't hesitate at all to say, I'm going to charge you an extra $100 if you come back to me and you say you need this extra thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Do you charge for that discovery process?
I don't, and I probably should.
Like how much, give me a ballpark of time that you spend on an average project doing that upfront discovery.
Yeah, boy, that's hard. It's really hard to say because it depends on how long it takes you to figure it out. This maps project I just did, I Googled around and within 30 minutes had found something that was almost already what the client wanted. And I said, oh, I can hack that easy. So there you go. That was 30 minutes discovery. But a client might say, I need this other thing. And I might look around for days and not find anything. That's one of the reasons it's so hard for me to charge for discovery because I don't know how long that's going to take. Once in a while, I will come back to the client and say, you know what, I just can't do this. I could not figure it out. Here's a list of names. Call them all.
Oh, interesting. And yeah, several people are having the exact same thoughts because we're getting the same questions from Mike and Leslie and Jackie, and it was on my mind too. So interesting on the paid discovery.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that say you should charge for discovery, and it makes a ton of sense. You're working for them. I just had a discussion with my wife the other day. There's value in finding where the answers aren't. It's like Edison figured out all those ways to not make a light bulb. If he had never figured it out, the next guy who started could have looked at all of those and said, well, I'm not going to try any of those ways because we know those don't work. So there's even value in going back to a client and saying, no, I did not figure this out for you, but don't go look any of these places because I know what's not there.
Sure.
So if you can figure out a good way to, if you have a good relationship with your client and you can say to them, I want you to give me money for me to tell you that I don't know the answer, then go for it.
For those of you who are tuning in live a little later into the show, welcome. Glad you could join in. I'm talking with Topher DeRosier. We're talking about communication and the art of connection in terms of your business. So if you want to ask him a question, you can do that on Twitter using the hashtag OfficeFM or over on the Google Q&A app. And I'll try to remember to check that. So I looked over all of a sudden and there are several there. Okay, so we haven't talked about HeroPress yet, and I don't want to miss the opportunity having you on the show to discuss that. And for some of you folks listening in, you hear the word Hero Press, and that might kind of turn the light bulb on of who Topher is and one of his projects. But tell me a little bit first what Hero Press is, and then sort of the story behind it.
Sure. Hero Press is a collection of essays from people who have used WordPress to change their lives in some way. Its purpose and goal has changed very slightly over time. Very originally, it was going to be a collection of essays, kind of like TED or TEDx. And we did a Kickstarter, and if it had succeeded, I would be the president of whatever company that was. But it did not succeed. The Kickstarter failed, and most people believed Hero Press failed, including the owner. But I do not own Hero Press. I just run it. I did not want to give up, so I came up with a new way to do it, which was the text essays, which are much better in the long run than video, way better. And in the beginning, it was going to be essays from people on the periphery of WordPress. And in my head, that was people outside my social circle, basically. People outside the American WordCamp experience. All those people I met every 2 weeks going to WordCamp all summer. So it was people from India and Pakistan and Africa and Eastern Europe and things like that. But I quickly realized that everybody is on the periphery of something, whether it be finances or society or whatever. I'm very careful to say this often, but I think I try very hard to get as many women as possible on Hero Press, because I think of women in technology as a fringe. They're on the periphery of technology. It's fairly common knowledge that there aren't enough women in technology. And so I try to get as many women as possible to talk about their experience with WordPress. How did they get here? What do they use it for? How has it changed their life? In the beginning, I got well connected with a number of people in India, and that went over very, very well. I have a lot of friends there now. The WordPress community in India is huge, huge. I would suggest possibly bigger than in the US as far as number of developers. But they don't communicate. We don't communicate well with them. They don't communicate well with us. It's just they're two different societies. They're two different communities. And so Hero Press is a really good way to bridge that, for them to say, this is how I use WordPress. This is what my life is like with WordPress. And for them to read people from the US saying, this is what life is like with WordPress. But it's not just India. It's all over the place. We've had people from Egypt and Pakistan and Nigeria and South Africa, Rarst in Ukraine, people from South America. I think I have all of the continents now except Antarctica. And I didn't think I would ever get anybody in Antarctica, but I did some Googling, and there are a ton of people in Antarctica that use WordPress all the time.
Who knew?
Yeah, like everybody who does research down there blogs their research. And so I've tried to get a hold of several without success, but I'm hoping to get somebody from Antarctica using WordPress to do a Hero Press essay, because that'd be really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's essays about people who have been by.
Yeah, sorry, got a bad breakup there. I think
That's all right.
the whole internet is down. I guess
yes.
Everybody's watching Netflix right now.
Oh no, they're watching us.
Yes, we are taking down the internet.
That's right.
Office Hours FM has grown wildly in popularity just these last few minutes. So would you mind sharing thoughts on why you think the Kickstarter campaign for Hero Press tanked?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. We only kind of needed the money. What we were looking for was validation. And what we wanted was thousands of $5 donations. We wanted thousands of people to say, yeah, that's cool. Here's my vote with a few dollars. And what we got was 3 or 4 relatively high dollar, do you call them donations? Contributions from corporations. And like in the first 5 days, we were 3/4 of the way there. And it just seemed obvious. But then it immediately stopped because everybody who was going to give had given. And we didn't get that validation. Part of it was communication. In the beginning, we were trying to make videos to communicate to people on the periphery to say, here are other people in your area, people like you doing this. But we never communicated to India as a whole, hey, we're making this thing for you. You should come check it out. They had no idea. And so our target audience had no idea we were building this. And that was a big communication fail on my part. And given our timetable, I'm not sure it was even possible. We only had a couple of months to pull this whole thing together. But I would say the primary reason Kickstarter failed is that our audience did not know it existed. And I'm actually really glad it failed because what we have now is so much better. So much better.
Appreciate you
I'm not
sharing
making
that.
a living off it. Yeah, I would have been making a living off it if it had succeeded, and I'm not making a living off it now. And it would be fun. It would be really fun to make my living on Hero Press, but there's no money in it. I'm volunteering my time. The contributors are volunteering their time, and it's fun to do.
It's the WordPress way, contributing.
It is. Yep.
We've got a question here from Leslie. She says, I love your thoughts to make friends and build relationships. I have good relationships with my clients, though not enough yet. Any suggestions for an introvert like me to help build relationships?
Yes, and you're probably not going to like it. My wife is an introvert. She does not like groups of people. She doesn't like going to hang out with people she doesn't know. She tends to be very self-conscious about that. But she went with me to 12 WordCamps, and she made a policy to walk into a room, spot somebody who was not talking to somebody, and walk up to them, stick out her hand, and say, hi, I'm Kate. How do you use WordPress? And the conversation would start. And she still isn't very comfortable with it, but she has a zillion more friends now than she used to have. And it works. Often those people who are standing there not talking to somebody are also introverts, and they don't want to go up to somebody, and nobody's walking up to them, and they don't feel welcome, they don't feel comfortable, and have somebody walk up to them and shake their hand and say, hi, I'm glad you're here. Talk to me. They will like it. It will make them happy. And so my answer is grit your teeth and do it anyway.
That's a great idea or suggestion of having some questions in your back pocket ready to go. So your wife always says, what do you do with WordPress? And that way you don't have to think of conversation starters on the fly if that's not your thing.
Yep. Have a battery of questions ahead of time. Where are you from? What do you do? That kind of thing. I have compassion for introverts because I'm an extrovert. And I realize it can be very, very hard. So for you extroverts out there, look around for the introverts, and obviously don't overwhelm them because they're introverts, but include them. Include them. Say hi. Figure out, you can tell if somebody really doesn't want to be talking to you, they'll make it plain. But there are often people who are standing there wishing they were talking to somebody but afraid to do it. Stick your hand out and say hi, and you will make friends.
Good stuff right there. Circling back around, or this is probably going to be our last question here, but circling back around to the Hero Press conversation, Devinder, one of our listeners, he is from India, and he said, what was the project or idea in focus? You piqued his curiosity.
My project in focus?
Or excuse me, you said your audience that you were doing this for India, and you'd failed to communicate to them what it was you were doing.
Yep. Boy, in one of the very first conversations we ever had about doing anything before Hero Press was thought of, my boss, who lives in Australia, sent me a photo of a 4-year-old kid standing in an alley, and his mom was dumping a bucket of water over his head. He was getting a bath. And he said, I want to make life better for that kid. So, and I had total freedom as to what I was going to do. He said, I don't care what you do, but I want to make life better for that kid. And so from the very beginning, I had in my head the idea that I wanted to be helping the people of India somehow. I had no idea how. I mean, it felt even weird. It's the whole white man's burden thing. It felt even weird to be saying, I'm going to help them. And I was very, very grateful later on to be able to speak to so many Indians about what they thought their country needed and what they thought should be done. And I was connected with a guy in Calcutta who was part of a WordPress agency and was told, we have purchased their time, this agency's time. If you need to build something, use them. So I spent a lot of time talking with him, and HeroPress was really born out of conversations with him. They really struggled to get good contracts. It was actually a collection of freelancers. They had banded together because they were doing so poorly independently. And he said, we have a terrible time getting good contracts. I don't know how to do it. Will you tell me how to get good contracts? And I thought, well, I could tell you how to get good contracts in Michigan, but that's not going to help you. So then I thought, well, who would know how to tell this guy in Calcutta how to get good contracts? Well, it's going to be somebody else in India. So I asked around, and somebody said, well, WordCamp Mumbai is happening, and here are the organizers. Talk to them. And so I started talking with them, and most of them have been HeroPress contributors now. And I said, there's this guy in Calcutta who has these questions. I don't know the answers, but you probably know the answers. You're there in India. You know what society is like. You know what the national economy is like. Will you talk to him? And they said, sure. And the way that worked into HeroPress is I wanted people speaking to their peers. And so recently we had a writer from Nigeria write. And he wasn't writing to me. He wasn't writing to Americans. He wasn't writing to Indians. He was writing to Nigerians saying, this is what I did in my country with this money in this society. Here's what you could do because you're in the same place. And so my Indian contributors were writing to other Indians. My African contributors are writing to other Africans. Europeans write to Europeans, Americans write to Americans, things like that. So one of the restrictions to be a contributor is you have to pick an audience. You have to say, I'm going to write to all women, or I'm going to write to all American women, or I'm going to write to all New York women, or I'm going to write to everybody who lives in my state, or whatever. Because you have a story, you did something, you overcame something. Write to the people who have the same problem or issue.
Very cool.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, well, head over, for you folks that are listening, if you go to heropress.com, you can check that out in more detail. We are up on the hour, but boy, there's just two more things that I want to hit on, some great feedback. So going back to, we've got Teresa, who is an extrovert, and she, when we're talking about that kind of battery of questions to have at the ready, she suggests using the acronym FORM, where F is for family, O is for occupation, R for recreation, and M for money. So finding questions that follow form. Great advice there. And then Leslie, who was asking, the introvert, asking, about those initial meetings, she said that she can do that in person. It's that follow-up piece to build the relationship after meeting people. That's the hard part. Can you touch on that for a sec?
Sure. Follow-up communication can be awkward. I find that emails tend to be awkward. I never email someone after I met them at WordCamp and say, hi, we met, and here's my battery of questions, blah, blah, blah. Slack has been wonderful for a replacement for that. Because often you can even start communicating with someone on Slack while still at the event.
And just for folks that don't know, there is an official WordPress Slack group. If you just Google WordPress Slack, you'll find the instructions of how to get on there.
Yep. And often WordCamps will have their own Slack channel. And so find out what that is. And so, you met somebody in the morning and you get on Slack and there they are and you say, hey, want to do supper? Want to sit together at dinner? And you begin that relationship immediately. And it flows very naturally from in-person talk to online talk. And that just carries on. And, you keep talking to them over time. And sometimes it fades away. Sometimes, not everybody's compatible with everybody, and that's the way it goes. But then, I've met people at a WordCamp, and we've had great conversations, and then I've not talked to them for a year. But I see their name on Slack, and I'll say, hey, how's it going? Haven't talked to you in a while. You were going to have a kid last time I talked. How's that going? Oh, great. He's 4 now. Oh, it's been a long time. But start as quickly as possible after you meet them, communicating digitally. And Slack or Skype or any kind of chat is good. And boy, coming up with things to talk about is going to have to be organic. And that's where you get into the friendship. Once you're friends with somebody, it becomes easier to just talk about whatever. How's your wife doing? How's your car doing? I heard it was broken. How'd that work out? Just random normal people talk.
Yeah. Great nuggets of wisdom. We are going to, unfortunately, have to wrap up. So folks can get back to earning some money for the day. But thank you, Topher, so much for coming on and sharing your story. Where can people find you online to say hello? Or on Slack?
On Slack, WordPress Slack. I'm also on Post Status Slack. You can find me on Twitter at Topher1kenobe.com. You can see it there on the screen. HeroPress on Twitter, HeroPress.com, Topher1kenobe.com. If you just Google for Topher, I'm really high on the list, except for Topher Grace, who has screwed it up for everybody. But Topher1kenobe, Google for that, and you'll find my presence everywhere on Flickr and Last.fm, everything. So that's the best way.
Fantastic. And if anybody wants to catch the replay of this episode, you can always do that over at officehours.fm, or it will be available for infinity over at youtube.com. You can check out my channel there. If you want to keep in the loop about what's coming up next and get show reminders, you can do that at officehours.fm/subscribe. And this was episode 87 if you do go back looking in the archives for it. But with that, we will wrap up. Thanks everybody who tuned in live, and those of you who are listening to this after the fact. Appreciate my listeners. And Topher, thank you very much, sir, and have a wonderful day.
I will. I'll see you.
We'll see you. Bye.
Bye.